All right, let's talk about a term you've probably heard a million times. A single label that has basically defined how we think about our ancient ancestors. But what if I told you that term isn't just a little bit wrong, it's a full-blown myth?
So, let's just dive right in with a little thought experiment. I want you to picture a person from the Mesolithic period. We're talking the Middle Stone Age in Britain, right after the huge ice sheets pulled back. Just close your eyes for a second and imagine that person. What do you see?
Is it kind of a raggedy figure, maybe chasing a deer? Or a lonely nomad wandering through a forest, hoping to find a few berries? If that's the image in your head, then yeah, you've been sold a fiction. A story that wasn't dug out of the ground but was basically dreamed up in a comfortable armchair. And today, we're going to take that myth apart.
To really get why this term is so problematic, we have to go back to where it actually came from. And here's a spoiler. It has almost nothing to do with archaeology and everything to do with a pretty biased way of looking at the world.
Yeah, that's right. The term hunter-gatherer wasn't found on some ancient pottery shard. Nope, it was invented back in the Victorian era. And the whole point? It was for anthropologists to sort all of humanity into these neat little stages, with their own society, of course, sitting right at the very top of the pyramid.
And this right here, this shows you exactly how they saw the world. They literally called it a ladder of civilization. You start at the bottom with savagery, work your way up to barbarism, and if you're lucky, you reach civilization. It was a rigged game from the start, basically designed to say that if you weren't farming and writing like a European, well, you were on the bottom rung. It was never about describing people. It was about ranking them.
And that's really the crucial point here. This term was never, ever meant to be a scientific tool for understanding. It was designed from day one to dismiss, to label entire groups of people as simple or primitive and just move on. So you've got this neat, convenient story, this easy label. And for decades, it stuck. But then, the actual evidence, the stuff coming out of the ground, it started to talk back. And it told a very, very different story.
For years, the accepted picture was just so simple. You had these small little bands of people, always on the move, just scraping by, living hand-to-mouth in Mesolithic Britain. It's kind of romantic in a tough, gritty, survivalist way. But that simple picture just couldn't hold up against what archaeologists were actually finding.
The first thing to go was this idea that they were constantly wandering. Because all of a sudden, we're digging up the remains of actual timber houses built along rivers. We're finding these huge platforms built out into wetlands. I mean, come on, you don't build that kind of thing if you're just passing through. That's planning. That's putting down roots.
And then there's the idea that they were isolated, totally blown out of the water. They found axe stone from one single quarry that had been traded clear across Britain. And get this, obsidian, a type of volcanic glass, was moved all the way from the Alps. We're not talking about a few disconnected groups here. This was a connected world. These were huge trade networks.
But the real nail in the coffin for this myth, the single piece of evidence that just shatters the image of the isolated land wanderer, boats. Seriously, the second you have boats, you have everything. You have complex logistics, you have navigation, you have connection. The entire image of them just passively wandering around, it just dissolves.
So you might be wondering, with all this evidence piling up, how did the old idea stick around? Well, they came up with a pretty convenient little loophole, a get-out-of-jail-free card. Whenever they found something that didn't fit the story, like a big settlement, they'd just go, oh, well, that was just for seasonal use. It was a way to explain away the evidence and keep the old myth alive, even when it was screaming that it was wrong.
Okay, so if the old story is dead wrong, what's the right story? What does the evidence actually show us? Let's build this new picture.
First things first, you gotta completely rethink the map. We tend to look at bodies of water like the North Sea and the English Channel and see barriers, things that separate us. For these people, those were highways. They were the connectors. This wasn't a land-based culture. It was fundamentally a maritime one. Rivers weren't obstacles. They were the main roads, and the people using them were expert traders.
And look at this. This table just lays it all out, plain and simple. The myth implies they just wandered around. The reality? They had established settlements they returned to.
The myth says they lived hand to mouth. The evidence points to surplus goods and storage. Isolated? No way. They traded across hundreds of miles. Simple and passive? Not a chance. These were engineers and navigators. They weren't just reacting to their world, they were actively shaping it.
So at the end of the day, why does any of this matter? I mean, it's just one term, right? Well, no. This is not just some dusty academic debate. The words we choose, the labels we apply, they have real power. They fundamentally shape how we see the people of the past.
Because here's what it all boils down to. When you call someone a hunter-gatherer, you're not just describing what they ate, you're defining their worth. That label comes with all that old Victorian baggage attached. It stops being about food and starts being about intelligence, complexity, and ultimately, the respect these people deserve.
The real picture that emerges is of a people who were not dumb. They were not backward. They were incredibly smart, adaptable, and strategic innovators. I mean, think about it. The world was changing dramatically after the Ice Age, and they didn't just survive. They thrived, using sophisticated engineering, navigation, and trade.
So, what should we say instead? How about we just ditch the lazy label? Let's get specific. We can call them maritime Mesolithic communities or pre-agrarian traders. Better yet, how about we just describe what the evidence shows they were actually doing, like the people of the Severn Estuary who were expert canoe traders. It's more honest, it's more accurate, and frankly, it's a lot more respectful.
So I'll leave you with this, a final challenge. The next time you're in a conversation and someone casually uses the term hunter-gatherers, just ask them, which ones do you mean? Do you mean the engineers, the boat builders, the continental traders, or are you just repeating a dismissal that was invented almost 150 years ago? It's a question that forces all of us to look at our deep past with fresh eyes.